Hi there, and welcome to the first video in this series of CodeRunner video tutorials. In this series, we're going to be covering the content required for you to get 100% in your CodeRunner exams and the mentality, thinking, and approach you should be following when going about this. So I'm going to be running through how my mentality was when I approached CodeRunner exams and how I went about preparing for them and what I needed to know. And it really is a simple process, overcomplicated by many people. And if you follow this process and you understand what I'm about to tell you, please don't skip this video. It's extremely important. It's the fundamental around everything I'm going to be teaching. You will be able to cover the whole thing in a day. Just make sure you watch and pay attention to everything I'm about to tell you. It's really simple if you understand how to go about this. So let's get to it. So the first thing to consider is that the CodeRunner exam is repetitive. And what I mean by that is that the mocks they give you, the labs they give you, and the questions I'm going to give you on Scholar Hall really follow the same structure as the kind of questions you're going to get in the exam. Most likely, the retakes that you're going to take are going to be extremely similar to the exams that you took first time, if not completely identical. And the exams taken year on year are going to be exactly the same. And why do I know this? Because there's a very limited number of questions they can ask and a limited way they can ask them. So the kind of questions they've given in labs and the kind of questions that I'm going to be showering you with and I'm going to give you resources for are all going to be around the same kind of structure. So we're going to be using that and we're going to be using that to our advantage to make sure that we get the best possible result and we understand everything. So there's only a few things you need to remember as a result. So what I'm going to make sure of is that you cover the preliminary content and the preliminary understanding so that level of understanding is there. And then all you really need to do is use Scholar Hall as a resource to use the knowledge on there and apply it into the CodeRunner. You do not need to remember much at all. This is a really simple process if you know the right things. And I'm going to make sure that you do. You will get 100% by the end of this series. So what topics are there within the CodeRunner exams? So CodeRunner 1 covers variables. That means declaring and printing them, returning them. Conditional statements. That means your if conditional, your else if, your else. Loops, your while, do, your for. Arrays, so that means your two-dimensional flat and your array lists. If I've missed anything there, you know I will cover it in the tutorials to follow or the in-depth ones that are already on my website. So we will cover this in greater detail soon. So CodeRunner 2, built-in functions. This means the pre-existing functions within Java use defined functions. They're expected to create your own function and call upon it, manipulate it perhaps, and debugging and exceptions, which includes the hill climb algorithm, although I haven't as of yet seen that in a CodeRunner exam before. So, but I will be covering it for novelty purposes and just to cover all your bases. So what can I say the biggest mistakes are within the CodeRunner exams? The biggest probably is not copying the method statement properly. What do I mean by this? You are given within the question a statement like public static int prime numbers, and then you've got within the brackets int n, right, as your variable. People don't copy that properly. So what they'll do is in a rush, they might be flustered, they might be overconfident, they'll write that in and they'll spell public wrong. Or they'll spell prime numbers not in the way that they wanted it spelled. Or, anything can happen and you haven't copied that in properly. Huge, huge mistake. I've made that mistake many times where they were prime numbers with an S at the back and I haven't put that S and everything's wrong because it's sensitive to that kind of stuff. So we're going to make sure that we copy that statement. Easiest way is to just copy and paste it right in and make sure your brackets are there. So spelling mistakes is a huge one. Spelling your variables wrong happens all the time. You just have to make sure you're extra careful, check line by line, you've got everything correct. You don't want to take those chances. Missing brackets is a huge one. Make sure you in, right? If you're going to open a brace, close it straight after. It's, if you have that kind of a discipline, you'll make sure you don't lose marks unnecessarily. Not putting in a return statement is a big one. Surprisingly, I've got a large amount of people coming up to me not putting in return statements and using system.out.println. System.out.println is not a return statement. So I will go into greater depth later, but if it's public static int or public static string in any kind of data type, you will be returning that datum. So if it's an int, you're going to be returning an integer. If it's string, you're going to be returning a string. If it's void, then you won't be returning anything, and you're likely just going to output to the console using system.out.println. System.out.println will not return a statement. It will just print it to the console. So we'll make sure we instill that into anyone who doesn't already understand that. And don't worry, if you're wondering what I'm going on about now, I will go into it soon. So, and then not putting the return statement in the right place. I got that a lot. So if you can have a for loop with some conditionals and you won't know where to put it, where you put it is, will really determine how it acts. So we're going to cover where to put your return statement to yield the proper result. So what will be in this series and how will you finish? So this will take no longer than a day. You'll be able to cover all your bases in this series in no longer than 24 hours. Well, when I say 24, I mean more like 8 hours. You'll be able to cover everything and fully understand, practicing it all. And you can use the rest of your time just doing practice questions, and I'll lead you to those questions. So I'll be covering what your preliminary knowledge needs to be. This means your tiny little knowledge base that you're going to need for this. And then you will use Scholar Hall, and I'll show you how to use Scholar Hall in order to get 100% and leave that exam within the first 10 minutes. And I will teach you how to check your answers with Eclipse. This is hugely recommended. So just before you hit that submit button, I'll show you how to input your code into Eclipse and make sure you get the result up that you want to get. And then your pre-exam prep. This means what you might need just to flick through before your exam, how you're going to need to think, and what your mentality needs to be just before your exam. This is super important and could mean the difference between you getting a 95 or a 98% and that 100% that you're looking for. So this is the end of the slide. I hope you really enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time.